Welcome to the Lit Workshop.
Today we're going to talk about subject-verb agreement. Think about the sentences that you write and read. Those sentences are formed a certain way. They all have subjects and also predicates. Before we go into subject-verb agreement, let's go over what are subjects and what are predicates. A sentence is always about a particular subject. A subject can be a person, place, thing, or idea. For example, a subject can be a girl. Maybe the sentence is about that girl. A subject can be a theme park, a place. It can also be a thing. For example, maybe the subject is an apple and the sentence is telling you about this apple. Another important thing to know about a subject is that it can be an abstract idea. For example, maybe we can have a sentence telling us about love. Now, although love is not physical and not tangible, or you can't touch it or see it, it is an abstract idea and the sentence can discuss it, and thus it is a subject. Now, we know what a subject is, but what is a predicate? In a sentence, there is a subject, but there is also a predicate. A predicate is the part of the sentence that contains the verb. What is a verb? A verb is an action word or phrase. That verb tells us what the subject is doing in the sentence. For example, let's look at this sentence, the boy reads a book. We know that the subject is the boy. Now, what is the subject doing? Well, the action words in this sentence tells us that the boy is reading a book. Let's look at the other sentence. Amber dances to the song. We know that the subject is Amber, but what does the action word in the sentence tells us about the subject? Well, Amber dances. Last but not least, love is needed. We know that the subject is love because the sentence is about love. But what is the action word telling us about love in this sentence? It's telling us that love is needed. So as you can see, the predicate is the part of the sentence that has the action word or phrase that lets us know what the subject is doing. Now that we have a basic idea about the subject and predicate, now let's talk about verb agreement with the subject in a sentence. In every sentence, the subject and verb must agree in number. That is simply saying that if there is one subject, meaning a singular subject in the sentence, the verb that describes that subject must also be singular. The way that we ensure that the singular verb is there is by making sure that the action word has an S or ES added to it. Let's take a look at these two example sentences. We have the dog runs. How many subjects do we see in this sentence? Well, we only see one subject, the dog. Now, the verb is run, but we know that the verb has to agree in number with the subject. So in order to make the verb singular, we have to have an S at the end of this verb. So it becomes the dog runs. Let's look at the other example. Esperanza reads. This subject is Esperanza. It's only one person. So the verb has to be singular. So in order for that verb, read, to become singular, we have to add an S. And that suddenly becomes Esperanza reads. Let's look at some other example sentences in which we see a singular subject and also a singular verb. Now, as mentioned before, in order to make a verb singular, we have to add an ES to some verbs. For example, Maria fixes cars. Maria is the subject. It's only talking about one person. So the verb that describes what Maria is doing has to also be singular. But in order order to make fix singular, you have to add an ES to it. Let's look at another example. We have Tavares catches the ball. Now Tavares is only one person, so that means what? Yes, our verb has to be singular. So we have to add to this particular verb, catch. We have to add ES to make it singular. And by making it singular, the verb is going to agree with the singular subject, which is Tavares. So we've gone over the fact that singular subjects must have singular verbs. Here are some verbs that we know. When we add an S to it, it becomes singular. We have drop. When we add an S to drop, it becomes drops. We have kick. Add an S to it, kicks. Love. Add an S to it, loves. Pay. Add an S, pays. Want. Add an S to it, wants. Use. Right, add an S to it, uses. So these are verbs that are made singular by adding an S. But we know there are some verbs that are made singular by adding an ES. Here are some examples. Attach. When we add an ES, attach becomes attaches, and now it is a singular verb. Fix. When we add an ES, fixes. Itch. When we add an ES, itches. Push. Pushes. Teach. Teaches. Flash. Flashes. Now that we've already gone over the fact that singular subjects require singular verbs, now we have to understand that plural subjects require plural verbs. Now, a plural subject is when a sentence has a word or phrase that refers to multiple people, places, things, or ideas. If there are plural subjects in a sentence, we have to have plural verbs. Now the question is, how do we make sure that a verb is plural to agree with the plural subject? Well, it's pretty simple. Make sure not to add an S or ES to the base verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. Here we have Michael, Tanaya, and Jacob play. Now, unlike previous examples, the verb in this sentence does not have an S. That is because we have multiple subjects in this sentence. Michael, Tanaya, and Jacob. Multiple subjects means that we have a plural subject, and thus the verb has to be what? Plural. Here is another example sentence of this rule at play. Jamal and his dad laugh. Now we have two subjects, Jamal and his dad. The verb that is used to describe what they're doing is laugh. We're not going to add an S to laugh because the verb is plural, so it doesn't require an S or ES for that. Now, you should have a better understanding about the rule of subject-verb agreement. Here are some verbs in their plural form. We have attach. We don't add an ES because if we add an ES, it will become singular. We keep it as attached. We have fix. No ES because this is the plural form. Itch. No ES. That's the plural form. Push. No ES. We're keeping it in the plural form. That's without the ES. Teach. No ES. And flash. No ES because we're keeping the base verb in its plural form. You have made it to the end of today's lesson on subject-verb agreement. So I want to leave you with these lit takeaways. Remember, a sentence is made up of a subject and predicate. The predicate of a sentence has the verb, word, or phrase. The verb word or phrase is usually a word or phrase that describes the action of the subject. The subject and verb in a sentence has to agree in number. If the subject of a sentence is singular, the verb has to be singular. If the subject is plural, the verb has to be plural. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for watching. For more resources, visit thelitworkshop.store.